Welcome back to another explainer. Let's just dive right in today because we're looking at history from a completely different angle. We aren't going to talk about kings sitting on thrones or generals commanding battlefields. Instead, we're tracing the epic hero's journey of an empire told entirely through its physical money. We're going to track the evolution of Spain from ancient tribes all the way to modern Europe, just by examining the actual pocket change that funded its rise, its fall, and its rebirth. Think of this as our stage select screen. We're going to level up their history by following the metallic bloodline of the Iberian Peninsula across 5 distinct eras: antiquity and Roman rule, medieval melding, the first global currency, the era of the peseta, and finally, entering the Eurozone. All right, let's kick things off with stage 1, antiquity and Roman rule. So before this era, indigenous Celtic and Iberian tribes didn't use money at all. They relied totally on bartering and these pre-monetary metal ingots. But then, the seafarers arrived. Mediterranean maritime traders brought the very first true coins to the peninsula. By the 6th century BC, the Greeks set up shop in Emporion on the northeastern coast, and they started minting these gorgeous Hellenistic silver drachms, stamped with the goddess Persephone and the mythical Pegasus. Down in the south, you had Phoenicians and Carthaginians striking bronze and silver shekels, and the purpose? These absolutely weren't for buying a loaf of bread at the market. They were designed specifically to finance expanding commercial empires and massive military endeavors. And it was exactly those military ambitions that brought the Romans to town. This is one of those dramatic cause-and-effect moments that literally changed world history. Rome invaded Iberia during the Second Punic War, not just to grab territory, but specifically to capture Carthage's monetary lifeblood, the peninsula's incredibly rich silver mines. The crucial takeaway here is how Rome slowly choked out local traditions to establish absolute control. At first, they allowed towns to keep minting the Iberian denarius, which featured local scripts and these cool galloping horsemen. But Emperor Augustus, he eventually shut down all those local mints. For the next 500 years, the monetary blood of Hispania was strictly standardized. You had the silver denarius, the gold aureus, and the bronze ass. Rome basically established the very concept of a universal, state-backed currency system across the entire territory.
Moving on to stage 2, medieval melding.
When the Western Roman Empire collapsed, the peninsula turned into this fascinating collision point of Germanic Visigothic culture and the Islamic Umayyad conquest. The Visigoths took over first, right? But they faced a massive silver shortage. So, what did they do? Well, they created the Trimissis. They basically ditched realistic Roman portraits for this highly stylized, almost abstract art of the monarch. Because gold was so incredibly scarce, these coins were essentially useless for everyday people. They were strictly tools for high-value aristocratic commerce and, honestly, just royal propaganda to project power over a very fractured land. But in 711 AD, a tectonic shift happened. An Islamic Umayyad army crossed the Strait of Gibraltar and completely overhauled the economy. They introduced this brilliant, super sophisticated trimetallic system. Gold dinars for international trade, silver dirhams for the standard marketplace, and copper falls for everyday petty trade. This structure was a real game changer. It turned the Caliphate of Cordoba into the absolute economic engine of Western Europe. Now, what's super interesting here is the artistic shift. Strict Islamic aniconic laws banned human faces entirely. Instead, these beautifully struck coins featured elegant Arabic calligraphy and Quranic verses. And these coins were so pure and so incredibly stable that even the northern Christian kings during the Reconquista heavily imitated them. They created bilingual coins that eventually evolved into the legendary Castilian currencies. That brings us to stage 3, the first global currency. Okay, the year is 1492. Spain unifies, discovers the Americas, and unlocks a monumental, world-changing monetary superpower. But before we get into the heavy economics of it all, I want to ask you a quick question. You see and use this symbol every single day, but where did the dollar sign actually come from? The answer is actually hidden right in Spanish imperial history. The massive Spanish 8-real coin prominently featured the 2 Pillars of Hercules wrapped in a scroll reading Plus Ultra. Busy merchants doing international trade, writing rapidly in their ledger books, began abbreviating this complex image. Over time, those 2 pillars and the winding scroll evolved into a simple S with a line through it, birthing the modern dollar sign long before the United States Mint even existed. How crazy is that? That coin was universally known as the Piece of 8. backed by the colossal silver veins of Potosí and Zacatecas in the Americas, this massive 27.4-gram chunk of high-purity silver became the undisputed bedrock of global trade. It was literally the world's first global currency, seamlessly accepted in marketplaces from Boston all the way to the tea houses of Imperial China.
But this brilliantly illustrates the dark side of that massive empire, a brutal dual economy. While the global Spanish Empire was just awash in high-purity silver financing foreign wars, there was a massive silver shortage back at home. Ordinary Spanish citizens were trapped in a domestic crisis. They were forced to use vellon, which was this constantly debased low-grade copper currency that triggered devastating waves of hyperinflation for the average person.
Which leads us into stage 4, the era of the peseta.
That earlier domestic instability pushed the country into the 19th century, a pretty chaotic era of civil conflicts and lost colonies that absolutely demanded a completely modernized and centralized currency. But as they tried to modernize, they had some pretty funny missteps. When the government launched new bronze coins in 1870, the back was supposed to feature a fierce, rampant lion, but the engraving was so hastily and poorly done that it honestly looked like a totally unintimidating house pet. The public cheekily nicknamed the 10-centimo coin the pera gorda, the fat dog, and the 5-centimo the pera chica, the little dog, and those hilarious nicknames actually stuck in the Spanish vocabulary for over a century. Now, here is a hidden Easter egg that constantly tricks modern coin collectors to this day. For over 100 years, Spanish mints used a secret star dating system. See, the large date stamped on the face of the coin, that's actually just the year the design was authorized by law. To find out exactly what year the coin was physically struck in the press, you literally have to grab a magnifying glass and look for tiny micro-engraved numbers hidden inside little 6-pointed stars on the coin surface. Let's look at how this incredibly resilient currency survived a century of chaos. The peseta was officially created in 1868 to perfectly match French standards in the Latin Monetary Union. But just look at this timeline. In 1931, the Republic strips away the royal crowns. By 1936, the Civil War plunges the whole system into such deep chaos that regular pocket change vanishes entirely, replaced by tiny cardboard discs and iron tokens. Then comes the Francoist regime with its iconic copper-nickel blonde coins in 1944, right up until the democratic transition finally puts King Juan Carlos I on the coinage in 1975. Amidst all that history, you get these incredible feats of practical design too, like the famous 25 peseta coin. It featured a prominent hole drilled right through the center. While it looked pretty cool, actually scratch that. It wasn't just to look cool. It was a highly calculated fix. It drastically saved on raw metals during economic hardships, it allowed blind citizens to instantly recognize it just by touch, and it functioned flawlessly in the newly introduced automated vending machines. Just a brilliant multi-tool of a coin. Finally, stage 5, entering the Eurozone. The late 20th century marks Spain's economic modernization and its deep, permanent integration into the European Union. And it honestly all comes down to this hyper-specific number, 166.386. On January 1, 1999, after 134 years of service, the peseta was definitively frozen. This exact number was the locked exchange rate of pesetas to one single euro. When the physical euros finally hit the streets in 2002, they represented a shared European identity on the front, but profound Spanish cultural pillars on the back. The 1, 2, and 5-cent coins showcase the spiritual heritage of the Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela. The mid-tier coins honor the monumental literary legacy of Miguel de Cervantes, and the 1 and 2 euro coins display the head of state, linking the modern democratic monarchy to a newly unified Europe. For almost 20 years, the Banco de España allowed citizens to swap their old money. But on June 30, 2021, those windows closed forever. It was a deeply emotional end of an era. Millions of unexchanged pesetas were left behind in family attics and jars, transforming overnight from legal tender into nostalgic relics of Spain's incredibly long history. So we've seen how a simple piece of metal can map out the rise of an empire, the devastation of civil war, and the dawn of a modern continent. So the next time you hear a coin rattle in your pocket, I want you to ask yourself, what history will this tiny piece of metal witness long after we are gone? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you in the next one.